Hello, founders. I have what I predict is going to be a barn burner of a session here. I've got a panel put together of three of my favorite ladies that I've been working with and engaging with, interacting with. We're all part of the community here at startups.com. Some I've known longer than others, but I put this together. They've never met. This is the first time that we're all getting together, have this conversation. And I just wanted to dish on a few things that have been on my mind that I'm curious about, want to get some perspective. Before we begin and jump into that, let's have an introduction. I don't need any introduction here. I want to take a little bit of a background and facilitate. But on my screen, I've got Christina, Moon, and Francis. They're all different, all unique, come from different backgrounds, but we got some similar stories and some things to share. Christina, how about you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MakeLab. We 3D print parts and prototypes for consumer and hardware brands. We're based out of New York and aim to have multiple locations over the next few years. Alongside MakeLab, I also do some pro bono, like volunteer work with community. And so I'm co-organizer of New York Hardware Meetup. And I'm also secretary treasurer of the New Women in Design chapter of New York for IDSA.
Oh, nice. That must be new. That's the first time I heard of it.
Yes, it's brand new. The launch party is actually this Friday.
Oh, nice. Congratulations. So
Yeah.
Christina's representing East Side, okay, over on the East Coast. And then we have Moon. Moon, welcome. Moon is coming to us. Where are you right now? You travel all over the place.
I do. I'm currently in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
But I
All right.
usually travel between Europe and Hong Kong.
Okay, so representing the international component of our little cohort here. Moon, introduce yourself.
I'm the founder and CEO of DigitSense. So we are basically a digital product studio, and we mainly help startups and corporates develop consumer web apps and mobile apps. So the more innovative ones, I would say.
Okay, awesome. And what's something that you're excited about that you're working on these days?
I would say, especially on applications that can change the world, really. So we recently just worked on a Google map, so a directional map for blind people and visually impaired. So it's a very interesting journey that we have gone through.
Very, very cool. And how long have you been doing this for, DigitSense?
I've been running for 3 years so far.
Okay.
And I'm actually involved in other medtech and other tech businesses as well.
Okay. And Christina, you're what, 2 years into this?
No, I'm actually 6 years into this.
Oh, my goodness. Where's the time gone? But I've known you for 2 years, so that kind of just take it that way. That's cool. And you've got one location in New York. And then how are you doing in terms of opening the other location?
Aiming for 2024.
2024. Very, very nice. And then anchoring us is Francis. Francis, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Francis, and I don't like cum. And so I invented this product called Dripstick. It's an after sex cleanup sponge. And around that, I built the brand Awkward Essentials. So we make hygiene products for what we call behind the bathroom door problems, just things people are dealing with in the bathroom and they don't want to talk about. So we have everything from pee funnels to wipes, to cum sponges, and we're super stoked to be expanding. You can find us in 2,000 CVS locations across the US and Spencer's. We're online and we're on Amazon.
How long have you been in the game on this one?
Not too long, maybe like 5 years.
5 years. Okay. Now, all of you have raised funding. I think this is important for the context of people who watch this. All of you have raised funding in some form or another. Christina, would you say you're VC backed now, right?
No,
not yet.
So we accepted 2 angel checks like last year, but they were pretty small. But other than that, no funding.
Okay. And then Francis, you are, or your family office funded, right?
Yeah, they call themselves a VC. I don't know.
Okay.
It's confusing.
Okay. But they act like VC, don't they? I would say. All
Mhm.
right. And then Moon, are you funded? How are you funding DigitSense right now?
Not really. We're bootstrapped, but we actually raised an angel round.
Okay.
So just take it as an angel investment, but I bought them out. So
Oh, very
no
nice.
longer.
Okay.
It's badass.
So yeah,
Nice.
shrewd business person. Now, a few things here. I think it's important to point out, if you notice, for everybody who's listening or watching, these 3 elevator pitches were super tight. Very important. It kind of gives you an idea of the pedigree or the credibility, kind of the business sense that we're working with here with these three lovely ladies. The second thing is, in the game for quite some time now, we definitely have different experiences coming together. What I wanted to ask, just to start off these questions, no boundaries here. Frances actually remarked before coming on, she said, if there were boundaries in this conversation, I wouldn't be here. We're just going to let it fly. And if we can't have nuanced conversation with opinions, or other people who are watching can't understand that, as founders, we have to have nuanced and contrarian opinions, or else we're not going to be founders. We might as well just went and got a corporate job. I'm sure everybody here would be super successful doing that. But we want to have a nuanced discussion and just talk about where we stand in terms of our journeys of being a founder, and then also dish on information or helpful pro tips for anybody who's watching who might be in the same context. But on top of that, have other people who are not relating necessarily in the same context as we are go, hey, wait a second, let me see this from another perspective, and then also challenge ourselves to see it from other perspectives as well, outside of our little group here, because for those of you watching, you'll notice that we've got a bit of Asian persuasion thing going on, all the Asian stuff, all right? And I wanted to start this off by asking a question, just generically, let's establish a baseline. What's it like being a founder?
I can take a stab at it.
Sure.
I think to some extent, it feels like you're always catching up. There's always a new fire, and there's always small wins. And that cycle of, kind of panic and stress happen almost within an hour of those, victory feeling wins. And that's what it feels like, especially if you've been at it for a little while. Like, the first 2 years, it's just like you're just trying to get started. And so, you're kind of still on your own timeline to some extent. But once you have customers, it's very much just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, yay, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, yay.
When I first started, someone told me, they said, life is like just a series of emergencies or fires to put out. And then sometimes you get a bit of a vacation from it all with a crisis. That's what they said. And then I was talking with another founder, and we were working on a startup together, and we're trying to do this whole disrupt the whole car auto repair industry. And she said, Ed, I get up in the morning and it's like I'm going to change the world, and then by afternoon I say to myself, I'm going broke. Like my business is going to fail. By the evening time, I say, I made it. I think I can do this. And then by evening, I go to bed. I'm going broke. Like was her cycle every single day. Kind of illustrates what you're talking about, Christina.
Yeah, that's definitely what it feels like. Like
Okay.
different scenarios and different end game scenarios, but those emotions should be pretty familiar. Otherwise, I question, what you're doing.
Yeah. And how much of your experience, what you just described, gets amplified or exacerbated by being in retail? Because you've got a retail location where people can walk in and you're engaging. It's not like users behind an app or a screen. It's real, front and center, in real life for you.
So it's interesting because we're not exactly retail, but if you compare us to like other B2B businesses, we're more towards like the retail side of things, because we do treat customers like we have a lot of customers throughout the day, and we real time interact with them, whether it's via email or phone, sometimes Zoom when they pick up. So we do get some taste of that retail life. It definitely have to have your customer face. Everyone in the office needs to be trained on how to talk to customers and how to deliver on the brand experience, no matter what. If you're in crisis and you just got off the phone with a, angry customer that was really not happy and really not nice, and they were screaming at you, like you have to be able to quickly switch back to having that customer, facing. I think, in some ways I tend to be someone that like focuses on something and tries to solve the problem really, really quickly. Like I'm just like racing to find a solution. So actually, I think, having these little interjections, I'm in the office too. I'm not as customer facing, but I will pop out and like say hi and interact when I'm not super busy. And so having those moments of distraction are actually pretty helpful to my mental health, because it's also where the little wins happen. Like when a customer walks out and they have their print and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. Like now I know XYZ and I can move either to manufacturing or like the next prototype. Like their wins are my wins. And so for me, I treat them as like happy distractions.
You said the two key words I would like to continually revisit: mental health. Thank you for anchoring us there. All right, Francis or Moon, who wants to go next? What's it like being a founder?
I can go next. I guess to me, it's more a sense of responsibility and a sense of fear. So I think I do agree with what Christina just said, because honestly, if you're not waking up to putting out fire every single day, there's something wrong with your business. You're definitely not progressing. That's the only reason why. So I guess like that's just, you've just got to deal with the fear every single day. And I always tell myself that I'm gonna go broke, but I started off broke, so I've got nothing to lose. That's what I tell myself. So I guess like it's just how you cope with the point of perspective that you have at the end of the day, and that's how mental health, can keep up with the pace of your business.
Mm-hmm. And you've got clients, same as B2B, what Christina says, but you don't deal with the same type of they walk into a location, but you've got clients to manage and clients to keep happy. So you can relate to what Christina says.
Absolutely. And I would say I'd rather do B2B, because usually B2B clients, business clients, they carry around the reputation of the company and they tend to act more professional. And B2C
Yes.
clients, they can do whatever they want with you, honestly.
The worst side of humanity.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's going to be interesting. We're going to compare. All right, Francis, what about you?
I think it's a disease and it's like a lifelong disease that you'll never get rid of. And you just keep going. Like you have it, right? And I think you have to have it to deal with that fear that Christina and Moon are talking about every single day. Like the amount of fear, the amount of stress, like the mental health challenges, just everything. Like objectively, why would you do this? Right? Like it doesn't sound like a reasonable thing to do, but you just do it and you keep going as a broke person. And if this one doesn't work out, you're going to do it again.
Okay, well, that begs the question, Francis, why are you doing it then?
I just wanted to build a thing. And I think that's where so many founders come from, right? They're like, I just want to build this thing. I want to see it in the world, or I want to solve this thing or serve these people. And you'll never really fully understand like the nuances or challenges, like some of the challenges that were just now, like in retrospect, saying like, wow, we could have never predicted the amount of education we would have to provide our customers. Like there's no way. We could have tried to think about it objectively when we started, but until we did it, there's no way. I guess we're just people that like trial by fire.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you touched on something that you've gone through when you say trial by fire. You're in CPG B2C, and you have a fair share of haters online. Dish on that. What's that like? That's different than B2B for sure.
It is. I think from a branding perspective, if people don't have strong opinions on what you're doing, then like your brand probably needs to be a little bit stronger, or your target market needs to be stronger, because you can't be for everyone. From like a mental health, just understanding the world perspective, it's kind of sad. Like if you've ever worked in customer service, you've probably experienced it. But I think as a founder, it's a little bit different than like working in a coffee shop and seeing like that side of humanity, which is pretty bad. But like we get so many like opinions and requests, and just, I don't know, people on the internet have a lot of time. And that's what they like to do with their time. And so it's just another one of the things that you have to deal with. But kind of like what Christina was saying, the folks that do reach out to us or email us and say like, wow, like this totally changed my sex life, or it's opened up conversation between me and my husband, or I thought I was literally the only person that was dealing with this. Like, this is great. Like, that's what makes it worth it. We just tell ourselves that the strong opinions that we see on the internet means that our branding is working.
That's a great perspective. I have to confess, I'm not a big social media presence. I don't have a big one, but I have enough to attract a few detractors here and there. A few haters have come out, after me, and I appreciate that opinion. I actually read my comments the other day and I got depressed. Like I started to get angry, and then I got depressed. I went through the stages of grief, like denial, started bargaining, all those things. And then I thought about you, Francis, and I said, Francis must have way more intestinal fortitude, resolve, and resilience than I'll ever have, because I've heard the stories you've told me of all the stuff like the dogpiling and just the rage baiting and polarization, you're into it. You're like, okay, we're going to polarize out there.
I mean, it's not easy. Don't get me wrong. Like it can break you, and it has broken, right? Like kind of that up and down emotional roller coaster that Christine and Moon are talking about. Like that is what's happening. I don't go into our comments because it's not healthy and it's not productive. And so we really try to say like, okay, the people who truly have questions, like please reach out to us directly. But I think with like the progression of social media and the internet, it's amplified how comfortable people feel just like expressing whatever they want online, things that they would never say to your face.
So here's an interim question. I just thought about this. Let's put you all in a scenario. You're standing at some conference or you're talking at a young budding entrepreneur wants to be a startup founder. I'm not talking about opening a small business. I'm not talking about, driving for Uber, being self-employed, or opening up a coffee shop. Says, I want to become a startup founder, do something different and disruptive. Should I become a founder? What's your answer and why? Super quick. Christina.
I like to lead with a negative because if they're still saying yes after that, then you've really got the grit. And so I'll be like, I would question why.
Okay. You would ask why, or you just say, no, don't do it, and then ask why, or how's the negative come in?
I would ask why,
okay.
And then challenge their beliefs. If they over glamorize, like I'm usually the one to like stir the pot a little. So I'm like, but what if this happens? What about this? Are you ready for this type of thing? Are you ready for blah, 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 blah? And, I kind of like, I don't like, fire away. I kind of I'm still a pleasant person during the conversation. I don't just like harp on them, but, I always try to bring the reality into things. And so
very true. Those who over glamorize this and see all the media out there, they don't last very long. I call them entrepreneurs. Moon, what would you say?
If you want money, that's not the way to go. It's just the dead truth, because a lot of them just thought, I'm going to be rich and all that. But honestly, like you're going to be poor and broke for many years until you make it, obviously. So yeah, that's just the reality.
Okay, so if you want short-term wealth or security, no. But long-term, it's very possible. That's what you think, okay?
Yeah, I would say if you have the grit and if you can go through all the ups and downs, then, congrats. That's what you deserve. But
okay.
If not, yeah.
Okay.
I would ask them what they're solving for, because if they don't have a thing they're trying to solve, then they're probably like over glamorizing entrepreneurship. And if they know what they're solving for, I would say to like bootstrap that shit. And then if you can, work for another startup just to like see and know. But sometimes not knowing is better. Ignorance is bliss. So
okay. Well, you're all very realistic about that. You're definitely not hype beasts. You're on the hype train as far as being a startup founder is concerned. Let's level up, okay? Level 1 complete. Next level. Everything that you said, how different is it being an Asian founder, okay? Now, correct me if I'm wrong. We've got Chinese. Is everybody Chinese here? Okay. So I'm Korean, so I'm going to stand out just a little bit. You're welcome. K-pop, okay? We got K-drama and K-pop thing going on there. Tell you a funny joke. I'm going to digress just for a moment. I was living with a Jewish lady. Okay. She was older and she was divorced, and she let me live in her place. And it was a real rough time. Like I was homeless just before, right? As an entrepreneur, I was homeless. And then she brought me in, and she was Jewish, divorced lady, very wealthy. I lived on a golf course. I got to rent a room in return, pretty cheap, for helping her get through some surgeries and just being helpful around the house, right? And then her mother calls, and then I answered the phone, and she was like, who the hell are you? And then passed the phone over to my landlady, and she says, oh, that's Ed. What's his last name? Kang. And her mom says, Kang, that's not a Jewish last name. And she says to her, no, he's Korean. And the mom, who's older, was like, what? He's Korean. What? He's Korean. And she's yelling, she's screaming Korean on the phone. And then finally, in exasperation, she yells, he's Chinese. And then the mom says, oh, that's all you had to say. What kind of Chinese? There are different types of Chinese. Like there's Chinese Korean, there's Chinese Japanese. That was the perspective. And I got a big dose living in that community of what it was like to be Asian. This was the first time that I experienced racism where I lived. It was fascinating because I grew up in Canada and I was surrounded by Asians all over the place. So that's leading into my question. What's it like? Is there any difference being an Asian founder as opposed to just being a founder? Who wants to take this?
I grew up in New Jersey and there was like a decent Asian population in my town, but it was mostly like white Jewish and Italian. And so I definitely stood out and my mom put me in like summer camp and stuff. And I think I was one of two Asians in the whole like sleepaway camp. It was insane. So I always felt different. But I feel like that kind of prepared me for entrepreneurship and just being able to stand on my own 2 feet, like no matter what. I've already been like the odd one out many times. And for not only just being Chinese, but also like having a single mom, like there were a lot of different things that I think prepared me. So I have a lot of resilience, but I'm also very aware these days, right? And so I feel like perception is a very big thing with how someone interacts with you, and they don't even know it. Right? It's not even, I wouldn't say it's in their consciousness. So I feel like there's one of three stereotypes for Asian women being a co-founder and CEO. You're either extreme boss lady and like, that's it, people kind of stay away. You're sexualized, or you're regarded as submissive. And so people will talk to you in a way that they would talk to like their kid, or I don't know, someone that they don't regard with much respect. And I do receive like a dose of each one of those, which is really interesting. I haven't been in neighborhoods and towns where I was not the minority. And so I feel like I just kind of lean into it, and I like to surprise and delight. And so it kind of gives me an edge when I can break those stereotypes and like that are coming at me, and it makes me stand out more. So I kind of turn it and twist it a little bit.
Okay. How much do you identify yourself as an Asian? And I'm going to bring this up because I think it's relevant to conversation. You're in an interracial relationship, right?
Yes.
You're married and your hubby is amazing. Like he's just the coolest dude in the world. I love talking with him. Francis, you're in an interracial relationship as well. And Moon, what's your relationship status, if you want to divulge?
Unfortunately, I'm single.
You're single?
Yeah.
Okay. Christina, how much do you say I am Asian? Like, how much does that run through your mind?
All the time. I feel like growing up, like in New Jersey and stuff, like there was a lot of, I don't know if this is the PC term, but like whitewashing. And so I definitely grew up with that mentality. But I went to Pratt, and Pratt is like, there's so many Asian students at Pratt. And so that was a bit of a culture shock. And then I've learned to truly embrace it, I think, after 2021. So like during COVID and just like when everything was kind of blowing up, there was a lot of Asian hate. Like I kind of really leaned in those times. And I feel like I'm embracing my culture and like where I was born and like all those, like everything, so much more. So I definitely identify a lot more than I used to.
Okay, makes sense. It's good to get that. Thank you for sharing. Moon, what were you going to say?
I wouldn't say like there's anything different being an Asian, because I grew up in Hong Kong. It's obviously we're all Chinese. Then I moved to London, and obviously most of them are Chinese as well. And it's very multicultural anyway. So there isn't sort of racism doesn't really exist. I mean, it does, but not on my level, and it doesn't really bother me anyways. But I would say I would agree with Christina, especially on the being sexualized part. Actually, it happens very often, and because I started off my entrepreneurship journey quite early as well. So DigitSense, I founded it when I was 24. A lot of people would take advantage of me trying to run my business, trying to make business meetings, and then they would turn a business meeting into a date. It's very interesting. But then it's just what it is. It's easier even sometimes because of how you being like a younger female, especially Asian female, it's easier for you to get your foot through the door, to get a meeting. But whether or not they sign a deal with you really depends. But I would say I would take advantage of it.
Okay, wait a second. When you say you're sexualized and you are in Asia, you're surrounded by Asians. So you're saying other Asian men sexualize you?
Not really. So funny enough, because we take mostly foreign businesses. So even if
Gotcha.
I am having meetings in Hong Kong or in London or whatever, they're usually like other ethnicities.
Okay, so Christina, I'm going to guess that it's not Asians that are creating this experience where you feel sexualized as an Asian.
No.
Francis, we've talked about this before, especially the sexualization, but what's it like being an Asian founder?
I think Asian founders, at least in the US, like can't really get their shit together. Like there's not really like a like we haven't really found a way to like support each other. And at least in the CPG world, I've noticed this trend where Asian founded CPG companies are very hot right now, but only if the brand is like rooted in something Asian. So like it's a brand new version or healthy version of an Asian food, or like they really like use their Asian story and background. But if you're just like an Asian person trying to do something normal, I don't feel like you really have that community or like you get that support. It kind of, I mean, I think it kind of sucks. A lot of people don't know that I'm Asian. And every once in a while we'll send out an email and people are like, whoa, we had no idea this was like an Asian founded company. Like from a founder perspective, we have like AAPI month, and I feel like you get a little bit of spotlight there. But other than that, there's not like funds for Asians or like grants for Asians. Like we're just kind of weirdly in the middle, maybe because of the model minority thing. I have no idea. And then I guess from a brand perspective, I've gone back and forth because in CPG, at least being like the face of your brand and being out there and being the founder, even our investors encouraged it a lot. Like, is it effective as an Asian person? Because it's unusual, right? Like a lot of the bigger brands and faces, it's like a white dude or like some white girl. But like, I don't think there's a lot of brands with an Asian female founder that like really lean into that and like leverage that face as, and I don't know if it's because at least being Asian in America is not normalized or kind of unusual, or if it just like doesn't go over as well. Like we're in a weird time.
And as a founder of a femtech slash sex tech company, however you want to identify, I'm sure people have kind of bucketed you in different ways. How much of that sexualization have you experienced? And I'm curious, in your opinion, would that sexualization be any different if you were Caucasian?
Our product on the outset sounds ridiculous. And so it's more so like talking down to instead of sexualization, because it's not a pleasure product, right? So people are like, is this even like real? Like, or do people even have this problem? Or like, I think being talked down to, at least by investors, it's like not an Asian thing. It's a female founder or like a first time founder thing.
Gotcha.
So that's more of like a confidence, like female founder, just like learning how to like be in that room. But I will say there are hardly any Asian people in this like femtech, sex tech space, which is most likely a product of like our background and upbringing. We didn't grow up talking about this, or like parents absolutely would like murder you if you like started a company in this space. So there's very few of us in our particular space. And then I guess like in general in the entrepreneurship world.
Moon, I want to pop back to you and just ask you a quick question. I've noticed, because I lived in China, so obviously there's the whole political situation, China, Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, right? Now, I deal sort of the background coming from Korea. Korea, Japan is a big thing. Now it's Japan, China, like Japan and China are going at it. Like we get that experience whatsoever. So it's not about Asians for us. It's about the different types of Asians and where you come from. But Chinese, I find unique and different in the sense that I find that people in China look at people in Hong Kong and go, you're Chinese. How come we're not doing stuff? How come you don't consider yourself there? And people, Chinese in Hong Kong, are like, we ain't Chinese like you think we're Chinese. How much do you experience that? Is that true? Am I way off? Or what's your experience there?
I would say you're partly right, actually, because so Chinese people would be the only ethnicity that actually discriminates against each other. So it's not just Hong Kong people, but let's say people from Shanghai or bigger cities, they would regard themselves as Shanghainese or whatever they call it. It's just a pride thing, honestly. So it's nothing to do with just Hong Kong and China. But even people from Beijing, they would be like, oh, so you're from like a second tier city, right? You're not from the capital. And they look down on you. It's just a thing.
In China, they have I forgot the term. I think it's Hoku, the system there where if you are born in Beijing, you get access to different infrastructure and healthcare, education, all this stuff. If you're not born there, and even if you move there and you work there, you don't have the same rights. Like you literally do not have the same human rights as if you were born in that place. So a lot of people want to get married and they call it the Beijing green card. This is fascinating. When I heard about it, I had a gal, she was really chasing after this guy who was born in Beijing. She said, I want my Beijing green card. I was like, not an American green card? She's like, Beijing green card, so my kids can go to school in that system. So there's that Moon is dealing with over there. So here's my other interim question for all of you. How much did having Asian parents and whole, I don't know if you had a tiger mom situation, like how much does the whole Asian study, become an engineer, play piano by night, and be super successful by day and all that family pressure, you got to take care of us. How much did that affect you as a founder?
100% for me. I was one of those actually, because so what you said, right? I play piano till a diploma. I played badminton semi-professionally. It was all forced by my parents. I basically did everything pretty well. I got a good degree and all that. And when I decided to ditch my degree and start my own company, they went nuts. So it's a big thing. I had to work really, really hard to prove that I can survive on my own. I can take care of my parents until they actually stop talking about it and stop asking my friends to find me corporate jobs.
Mm-hmm. And you take care of your parents now. I know you live together with them, but you actually have a very traditional configuration where the children go back. Are you the oldest? Because that makes a big difference.
No, I'm the youngest. My brother is actually in the UK currently, so I take up all the responsibility of my parents.
Okay, so you do, I wouldn't say conform, but you have subscribed in some way or another to that family system that's prevalent in Asia. Christina, Francis, tiger moms, Asian families, what's the deal?
Definitely tiger mom for me. My mom pushed me too. So every hobby I did or every activity, like I hated piano. Oh my gosh. I was like pretty decent at it, but like I hated practicing. So then I jumped to like the flute, and then I remember trying out for like the regionals, like, and I almost made it because I think my heart wasn't in it, but like, I was definitely pushed to like be the best in whatever I was doing. And then if I wasn't, I exited that activity. So like soccer, I sucked at, right? But my mom wanted me to do it for like the socialization and the teamwork and stuff. I did it for 8 years. I made one goal in my life. I loved sitting out on the sidelines for like half the game. Like that was my rebellion streak. So, doing this whole entrepreneurship, I still get shit about it. It's a huge riff. I think even marrying a not white, not Asian was definitely a really big thing too. I see it every time we interact with Manny and myself. Like, I see the disrespect. It's like very uncomfortable and very awkward. And even after 10 years, we've been together for 10 years. And I still get pushed to go to business school. I still get offers. Even now,
later.
6 years in, I get told that like, the stuff that the press and the media that I get is just glamorous. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not like everything I do is kind of like dismissed. So it's affected me a lot, but I think it's attributed to a lot of my hardworking nature, I think. And so I just try to ignore it to an extent because it's not healthy at some point.
How much of that I'll prove you wrong, watch me, I'll show you, do you got going on?
I used to have it a lot.
Okay.
And I think probably year 3 for me, in 2019, I think that's when I dropped it. And I started looking at my own internal reasons for why I wanted to like this to succeed. And it's less about like proving her wrong. I think it's more about me wanting to have an effect, me wanting to build something cool, me wanting to prove to myself that I can build. I love a good challenge. So that's like my own hill that I've created, my own mountain.
Francis, we've never talked about your upbringing. I'm curious.
It's kind of the opposite. So I did go to a super Asian high school and college. And so all of my friends were like, how many AP classes can I take? Like I play piano. But oddly enough, despite being in that like environment, my parents were not tiger parents. They were pretty like neo hippie almost. So they're very much like, what you love, like the money will come. The only requirement I had was to do team sport in high school because they wanted that like team interaction. But like my hobbies, like I started Tahitian dancing in high school. Like I did all kinds of weird non-Asian things. And I think that's how I got into college because I was like not doing the traditional things. I was doing unusual things. And so my dad is also a founder. So he also has a disease, which I think is genetic. And so I am very fortunate in this scenario because whenever I'm coming up with business ideas or when I decided to move forward with this current business, he was pretty supportive. I mean, he will call me out on my shit. Like, okay, you're not actually doing, you're just planning. You're not like taking action. Like you're not actually moving forward in the business. And even with this one, right? Everyone is like, what does your dad think? Which is like kind of racist, kind of sexist, right? Because they're like, oh, Asian dad. He must be like so mad or disappointed that you're in like the sex tech industry. But really in his mind, he was like, you found a problem, you created a solution, you're going to sell that solution to these people who have the problem. That's it. It's like simple business. It's like toilet paper, right? And so so I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to like leverage their home to ship out product, like very Bay Area, Silicon Valley entrepreneurship style. So that has been helpful because with all the pressures of entrepreneurship, I don't know if I would be strong enough if they were just like, no, don't do this, like on top of everything else. So it's incredible, Christina Moon, that you've even been able to like move forward this far with that pressure on top of all the other like crap that comes with entrepreneurship.
Again, how many would-be great founders are out there that don't because of the Asian parenting that occurs? And to this day, my family thinks I run a hedge fund. Like, they have no idea what I do. I explain it to them. I explain it to my wife. My wife tries to explain it, and they have no idea. And they go, do you run a hedge fund? And I go, yeah, I do. Pick whatever illustrious thing that you can brag about to the people you golf with and all that stuff. But I am the black sheep in the family for sure, because I didn't even finish university. Like, it's a big, no-no. So we can obviously talk about that ad nauseum when it comes to the academic pressures. Let's get into the final leg of this, female founder. I even want to ask the question. Let me start this off. I say female founder because it's alliteration, 2 F's, and I looked it up. But then I had some other women founders say, I don't like the term female founder. And I find it pretty crass when people call women females, like, you're a female, like that female over there. I find that questionable for sure. It doesn't sit right. But female founder is just a term that got accepted in Silicon Valley. It sounded right. What are your thoughts on even the term female founder?
I'm neutral with that. I mean, it's biological, isn't it? Why not?
And even biological and all that stuff is up for debate. Now, it's different over there out in Asia than it is in the West. But for you, female
I'm
founder,
aware.
yeah, it lines up and you're okay. And if you're called a female founder, total neutral response.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
I'm so on the fence. Like, some days I feel one way, and then other days I feel another way. And I also see it as an advantage to some extent. I'm like, if we're having a moment, I'm going to leverage that moment as the founder, right? If someone's giving me the stage and spotlight, yeah, I'm going to take up the space. Kind of like hope that like the mood I am in this week is kind of like, I hope one day we don't have to talk about it, right? Like, why can't it just be normal? Like, I don't want, like, I'm doing other things other than just being, and thank you for congratulating me on just being. But there's a lot of like other cool stuff that's happening. I feel like sometimes it takes up more space than the thing that we're actually working on. But at the same time, if there's a moment and it's having a moment, like, yeah, I'm going to utilize the camera time, the stage time to like boast about what I'm doing. I don't know. So I'm on the fence.
So you have no problems being opportunistic with it. Use it as an advantage when it's advantageous.
Kind of agree. I mean, it exists to point out the inequalities that we have. So if we don't like say it, then like no one doesn't get talked about. And then how does it get fixed? But then I also, on the flip side, it's like, well, like it's not like a female lawyer or female police officer, right? Like it's more in the founder space. So I guess until like all the inequalities and the issues are fixed, it's okay. But I totally get both sides.
Okay.
So I'm like kind of neutral.
Okay. Very diplomatic response. I appreciate that. So Francis, continue with you. What's it like being a female founder? What are your experiences? Give me the goods.
It's fucking hard. It's so hard. Like there's just so much stacked against you, whether you're like Asian or not Asian, right? Like the percentage of funding, just like the initial judgment. I like even like the female funds that exist. I've talked about this. I found that like the stakes are so much higher because there's fewer female funds and female VCs. They have to make a good bet, right? Because it reflects poorly upon them if their bets don't work out. And so they're just looking for so much more. And I understand why. And it's like it's not their fault, but it's really tough.
This has hit you like full frontal, like right between the eyes. Like you contend with this. Some of the stories that you share with me are pretty egregious.
Yeah, like all the things, like all the horror stories that it's like, oh, this happened to this female, like we've pretty much lived it.
Yeah. And how do you deal with that? Like, how are you coping?
It's really hard. I think having a supportive partner is very helpful. Like if I did not have that, I don't know. Who's willing to listen to you again and again and again, talk about the same stuff again and again and again. Having other founders that you can talk to and turn to. I think mental health resources for founders is really important. And it's something that we don't take advantage of. It doesn't even exist. It's really hard to find. I remember a couple years ago, I was trying to find a coach that like had some like therapy background, but that understood the startup space. And it was like almost impossible to find. And the ones that I found were like a gazillion dollars, which we can't afford. So there's kind of this gap because we go through so much, but there's not a lot of resources for it.
Yeah.
I guess having other hobbies and outlets too are helpful, like not letting it consume you. But it's hard because as founders, our business does consume us.
It is very hard. It's our identity. It's our baby. I get it. Moon, what about you? What's it like being a female founder on top of being Asian, on top of all that stuff?
I'd say I do get taken advantage of very often, especially when it comes to, well, I guess it's a trust issue, because I totally understand it because it's a cultural thing. Like we were raised understood ourselves as a female, and we go on and have families and have kids and all that. And a lot of people just assume that we are not as hardworking. We have other priorities, which is pretty much our babies and our husbands. So I totally get it, but then I really don't like how I need to prove like 10 times harder to other people that I can actually do it, whether or not I'm a female or I'm an Asian. I'm just a person with grits and guts, honestly.
I find in Asia, when I travel around China, like it is so much more patriarchal, like systemically patriarchal. But at the same time, in China, I know so many strong women executives because in Asia, both men and women have to work. The opportunity for a wife to stay at home and choose to be a stay-at-home mom is vilified because it's so competitive. It's impossible to survive out there unless both parents are working. And so I find that either you have such a strong matriarch in the family. She's like, oh, I'm going to do it all. I'm going to be the executive and raise the kids and do all this stuff. And the husband almost takes a back seat and might start to resent. Or it's the opposite where these potentially really great female executives are being systemically oppressed or put in positions like, oh, you know what, you're a woman, so go work in HR. Like that's just the default place. So I can imagine that it just becomes even more difficult when you're talking about being an entrepreneur or running your own company.
Yes, absolutely. And I would totally agree with what you said as well. And especially in first tier cities or first world countries or whatever in Asia, basically most women need to work. And that's the main driver of the family as well, because you can't really afford anything with your husband's salary only in the family.
It's interesting because I feel like growing up with a single mom, it was just me and my mom. And so I saw her like power through like so much. And so I've adopted that mentality of like, nothing can stop me. I'm just going to power through to the point where it might be a fault because I might not recognize when, my personal identity is affecting opportunities. So I'm trying to get better at recognizing those. So not only can I navigate them a little bit better, but also protect my mental health and not internalize, not say, oh, it's because I'm not good enough. It's very easy for me to quickly go to like that narrative. So I'm working on it because some things are just like some forces are greater than anything I can control. We're a small team and we have customers. And so the times that things have escalated, like this morning when I got the mansplaining email from a customer because I guess we didn't follow up quick enough, even though we followed up within 48 hours of a meeting. Regardless, this is very fresh, so it's very hot for me. But it's those moments where I'm like, you would not speak to my co-founder like this if he emailed you. Because I have the luxury of having my co-founder also be my husband, we have that intuition with each other and we know our strengths and weaknesses like to a T. And so in those moments, I feel super supported. Like Francis was saying, like having that support system is so crucial because I know that if there was an opportunity or there was a moment where someone was being rude about me to him, like he would defend me. And that just makes me feel super secure. Like regardless of what the outside world thinks, like I know to our core what we're doing and what we're about, and that he's got my back. And also, if someone is, a partner or a vendor or whoever is being rude, we kind of switch. And so Manny will go and be the point person for that. So my personal identity doesn't get in the way of doing business sometimes. I don't know. It's like part of me as I'm saying this, I'm like, fuck it, we shouldn't mind it, it shouldn't be a thing. But in the reality, it is a thing. And so we still have to navigate. And if I still have to navigate through it, and if I, as an Asian female founder, really want to make a difference and open doors, then I gotta be opportunistic and navigate to the best of my ability, given whatever circumstances to get to that point where I can open doors. And so Manny will hop in on things that, get to, if we notice something, if we see a pattern, we switch. So
that's great. Well, not only are you doing this for yourself, but because you're all unicorns in this space, in the sense, not talking about billion-dollar valuations, but when it comes to the type of founder and the confirmation or pattern bias that, the rest of the industry can have, you have a certain responsibility to send a signal to all the other young, female Asians out there that are considering this in the future. It's kind of like people possibly going to STEM or different things. You are making it possible, paving the way. 2 final questions, could be loaded, and I'm balancing it out. The first question is this: what would you say to that female founder, minority or not, who is all about raw, hear me roar, you guys are bad, we're oppressed, there's systemic racism, sexism, all this stuff happening around there, and they plant their flag and they literally make it an us versus them? What is your advice to them? Or how would you respond to an individual like that? Or how have you responded to those types of individuals?
Honestly, like I grew up in a very unfair environment. So I guess my advice would always be the world is unfair. Like whether or not you're a minority, whether or not you, even as a man, right? That there are things that are unfair as well. So I guess just deal with it, and you'll need to learn how to live your life anyways. And either way, if you want success, that's your end goal. You'll need to go and strive for it. You can't have excuses about being a minority, being oppressed, and all that, because at the end of the day, even if you shout out that you're oppressed, you're still going to be oppressed. Nothing can change.
I was going to say something similar is like, you have to, there's a fork in the road or a point where you get your flag and you continue on that path, or you balance it out with trying to get to your goal. So my question would be, what is your goal? Are you trying to plant that flag and, scream from the rooftops just about that flag, or are you trying to build something? Because if you're trying to build something, then to some extent, these are the non-glamorous words, but you just have to kind of deal with it. Like Moon was saying, like it is what it is. You can change things, but they might not change as fast as you're growing. So the way I think of it is you're changing things along your path, so it gets even 1% better for the person behind you, right? For whoever's up next.
Don't you think, though, that you need a certain level of advocacy? Like you need some people to yell with a megaphone to highlight the issue. It might irritate everybody else. And unless someone's willing to do that, then we're not going to look at it. Like what's the balance?
So I think a lot in terms of social media, like, because that's how I get things out. So like Twitter, Instagram, and I just make sure I have a balance. And so of like what I'm posting and what I'm talking about. And so if there's a lot of press opportunities, I'll make sure it's balanced. So again, there's that, I'm advocating, but I'm also building something. It's I don't know. It's interesting. I think it changes constantly. But I think the important thing is, like Moon was saying, you can't get to the point where it's stopping you. I think if you're getting to the point where it's stopping you, you have another goal, then I think it becomes a whole nother thing on its own. I think it's great to talk about. I think it's great to advocate, but it can't consume you 100% of the time to the point where that's the only battle you're fighting. It just can't stop you from doing what you were set out to do.
Like a million other battles you should be fighting as a founder and not as an entrepreneur. So you got to pick and choose. Francis?
You got to play the game to change the game. Because like if those statements are allowing others to perceive you as like difficult or whatever, then like how are you going to like raise that money and build that company and like gather more power? Like whatever you can do to gather the power so that you can be more powerful and make those changes in the future and pave a wider path is more beneficial to those founders after us. It's like why I'm still here, unfortunately.
You got to play the game to change the game. I like that. Okay, my next question. Let me set this up just a little bit. You know, the reason I really love startups is because it's a meritocracy. You're either going to get the traction, solve the problem, you have those metrics, or you don't. I wish that's how we approached everything. Unfortunately, I think sometimes we take this statement, we don't invest in startups or projects, we invest in founders. That can work against situations like this with a female founder, you know, et cetera, because we get these blinders on because people who invest, we're all risk averse. Like, you know, we think that VCs or investors in startups are these innovative people who want to do new things and change the world. No, we want to make money, so we're scared. And we got limited partners who yell at us, et cetera. So we're going to go with what we know. And so me as an Asian, I will invest. I'll be more open to investing in other Asians where other people won't. And I understand that's a reality. But I like the meritocracy. You either got the traction, you got the growth, or you don't. But my question to you is, someone in my position as an advisor and someone who sits on this side of the table, if you had a request for me on how I could help you, educate me on how I best position me and the rest of the community to help female founders, Asian founders, minority, underrepresented, underestimated, you know, founders, I don't know. But if you had to kind of say, this is what I'd love for you to do, or I wish someone would ask me on how to help me with this, what would it be?
Blind fund.
Blind fund. Okay. What is that?
Like, what's that singing show where they can't see the singer?
The Voice.
The Voice? Yeah. Like The Voice, but for funding, because like we all have our own biases, and even like Mask the Voice. So like, you're truly investing based on the story and the statistics and the pitch, as opposed to like what they look like or who you might think they are.
A blind fund. That's a tough one. Interesting. I'm thinking that one through, and I could see pulling that off if we were able to ask a lot of the other questions about characteristic traits. Grit, we brought up grit, resilience, and all that stuff, domain expertise, but not bring in any of the physical signals or ethnicity, things like that. A blind fund. That's the first time I've heard that. And Francis, have you brought this up before? Like, how much have you actually talked about this, and what reactions do you get?
I mentioned it to like one person, but I don't talk about it that much, but I do think it's I totally agree. Like, you have to understand, you have to like be able to garner the same information, but without being able to see them, you just can't, like, your biases can't take over. Like, you have no idea. You can't make those assumptions. And we would like to think that we don't make those assumptions, but we totally do. And so like, what can you do to try to block that from happening?
Okay, interesting. And Christina?
I would say for me, it's really about getting the message across to investors or even the community about each individual being having a different background, different upbringing, and especially I think for females in general, we have a higher level of compassion and a better communication skills, mostly I would say, and I guess like that's something that they really need to look into as a founder and a team leader as well as a CEO of the company. So I guess this is something that most people would miss out when they just look at the term sheet and the management account.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes sense. What about you? How could we support you? Because you're not necessarily raising capital in what you do. How do you want to be supported?
I would say, obviously, I think networking is one thing, but the most important thing is to get the message across that, because I'm in the software business, I'm not doing anything that is, you know, female related even. So I'm not even targeting that market. And I guess like the most important thing is to get across is what we can offer as our value, or what I can offer as my value as a founder compared to other male founders, or, you know, whatever background they have.
Mm-hmm. Why not target that market? I'm curious. I'm sure you could get some headway in there. Why not?
I don't like limiting myself to something that I am comfortable with, or that I think has a easier reach. I just do what I think is right.
Gotcha. Okay, I can respect that. Christina, how do we support you?
I feel like ways to support, it's like I'm not raising. And so I feel lucky in some ways that, you know, it was a really stressful time when I was, because all of these things were just so much in your face. And so, you know, my request support, my requests for support really align with that, just being of like a founder in a business trying to grow. I'm looking for customer acquisition. I'm looking for different tactics and strategies. I'm looking for mentorship and advice, on a high level. On the Asian female founder front, I think I'm looking forward to sitting down. When I sit down with people and I network, like I don't get the awkward comment of I support women. Like it's so awkward. Just like little things like that would make my life a little bit more pleasant, but it's not necessarily support for my business. It's just like, okay, cool, dude. Like I don't know what to say to you, you know. But I think in terms of support, I always look for community and network to guide me. And so I love setting up like monthly cadences with people just to learn from people who have done it before, who have just a little bit more experience, a lot more experience. That's a lot of what I look for.
Okay, let me get more direct with this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being 0 and 10 being absolutely critically important, how much do you want to be acknowledged as an Asian female founder in your conversations when it comes to your startups? Like just even acknowledging and being asked the questions or putting a name on it, putting a pin in it, flagging it. I don't care what you want to call it. How much acknowledgement do you want?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. Okay. It's under there. That makes sense based on what you've been saying. Moon, 1 to 10.
I'd say 5. I'm in the
5.
middle.
Right in the middle. Francis.
I'd say 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Okay. Kind of gives us an understanding where you're coming from. Last question. I'm going to leave this to you. What advice would you have for people who are going to be listening to this? You know, our community, startups.com, other accelerators, all the budding future young lady entrepreneurs out there, Asian or not. What's your best piece of advice that you would say that's going to leave people with enduring value that haunts them? Your voice rings through their minds as they go along on their journey. And they're like, I'm so glad I stayed to the end of this podcast and this panel because I got this one piece of advice. What would you say it is? Take your time.
I love what Francis said. Like, I don't have my own words, but you got to play the game to change the game. I think that's like tattooable.
That's a quote. I think it's like I can't remember who it's from.
Yeah, me neither.
I'll use my father's quote, actually. I just posted it on LinkedIn today. So this is what he said to me. You chose the way you wanted to live. Even if you have to crawl, finish what you started. So just don't give up, basically.
Okay. And that is one of the number one traits of any founder is this sort of stubborn, I'm not going to give up. Like how resilient are you, which really makes a difference. Doesn't matter how smart you are or what background. In the end, it's all about how long can you go. Do you need to crawl to get there? That makes a lot of sense. Francis, what's your advice?
Okay, I'll bring it back home to the startups.com thing. Will and Ryan's podcast, like so much of it is like gold. It's stuff I wish I knew before I started. They're able to vocalize, like I think the truth, like really the truth, and it's unglamorized and it's absolutely true. And so I tell a lot of founders to listen to it because it's real.
So get real or listen to the podcast.
Listen to the podcast.
Yeah. And I would say if I'm taking anything away from this is that you ladies, you're not saying, hey, we want more Asian founder groups and services and all these things. Yeah, that will be helpful. You're willing to play that game to change the game. But really, it's just we want to be treated equally, fairly, but realistically. And just give us the goods. And we all want to just have a very sober, in your face, let's just go through it together, whether we're crawling, no matter what we're facing. That would be the way to be most helpful.
Yeah.
Yep. I have to agree with.
What is your last thing? If you had to encapsulate sort of this conversation, what are your thoughts on the conversation that we had today? How are you feeling? And then we will conclude.
I was just gonna say that I'm really impressed with like Moon and Francis. I think there's a lot of shared like thoughts, and there was a lot of perspectives that like I took in today. And it was a really nice conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. And it's always nice to talk to people who can, relate to you, especially from similar backgrounds, similar upbringing, similar family values as well.
I really like that everyone opened up with like actual honesty and like no glamorization, just like it's tough, it's up and down every day, every hour, almost every minute. Because it's true. So I thought it was a really great conversation.
Okay. And I think that it's fair for me to say, or you can flag me and I'll edit this portion out, but all three of you are open to having conversations with founders just on a casual and relational basis who say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. I'm going to include your LinkedIn contact information and your website. So, and encourage everybody who's watching this, reach out, get to know these three fantastic founders. Forget Asian, forget female, fantastic founders who have carved out their own path. And the reason that I invited the three of you is because you have proven yourselves successful in your own right. And so everything you said today holds so much weight. Ladies, I want to say thank you again.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ed.
Ed.
This was fun.